All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. This is wrapping up the last formal session for the summertime before we start our academic calendar year. We sincerely apologize for our delay in starting the meeting tonight, but we are very grateful for your presence here, and especially grateful for the presence of some of the wonderful promotions that we are going to discuss later on. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get things started. I would like to ask Ms. Martin if she can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes. Good evening. We request that all cell phones and pagers be turned to vibrate or turned off during the course of this meeting, so thank you for doing that in advance. It has become a tradition to honor our nation at each of our board meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so please rise and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And normally we do have an ROTC group that leads us, but they have the summer off, and we will be back and running again in September. Next on to the superintendent's report.
Good afternoon, evening. Dr. Gabriel, members of the school board, ladies and gentlemen. This is the time where we normally have an opportunity to show you a video, but again, as we're readying for school, we're collecting items and putting everything together. This is our last board meeting prior to the opening of school, and so we want to remind folks that come to Tuesday after Labor Day, our yellow limousines will be on the road, and all of our babies walking to and from school, so please exercise safety. We certainly are working with a number of groups that partner with individual schools and the district to be able to support our students as we prepare to return to school, and also to support our buildings with some beautification and other efforts that are going on between now and the time that school's open. Next Monday and Tuesday, it's hard to believe, will represent our new teacher orientation. We have over 355 new educators that will be on board, and we're very pleased to say that as a district today, we only have 38 teaching vacancies, and last year we had 40-some in elementary alone. So kudos, to, as I said earlier, to HR and our principals for the outstanding work that they are doing, and thank you to those educators who've chosen Norfolk Public Schools. We then move into our pre-service time with all of our educators returning. Athletics begins to kick off, so we know fall is here. Our football players are already in practice, and volleyball will be gearing up soon. And so there's a lot that's going on, and so we ask you to stay tuned to the great work and activities of Norfolk Public Schools. I think that concludes the superintendent's report tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Boone, and congratulations on the decrease in the number of vacancies. That's great for our division, great for our kids. Mr. Butts, Deputy Clerk's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This evening is my privilege to share with the board a proclamation followed by a few recognitions. First, a proclamation. The school board recognizes Art and Education Week. During this week, the field of arts education joins together in communities across the country to tell the story of the impact of transformative power of arts in education. The school board of the city of Norfolk hereby proclaims September 9 through 15, 2018 as Arts and Education Week, and encourages all citizens to celebrate the arts with meaningful student activities and programs that demonstrate learning and understanding in the visual and performing arts. Madam Chair, if you, along with the board members and superintendent, can make your way in front of the dais, we can assist in acknowledging the recognitions. First, I'd like to recognize our Office of Purchases and Supply. They received the prestigious 23rd Annual Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award in 2018 for the National Procurement Institute, Incorporated. This is awarded annually to recognize innovation, professionalism, e-procurement, productivity, and leadership in the procurement function. Please welcome Ms. Carol Robinson, the Senior Director of Purchases and Supply. Now we'd like to recognize the Office of Accounting. They received two certificates of excellence in financial reporting for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2017. One from the Association of Business Officials, the ASBO International, and the other from the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA. This was awarded as a result of their comprehensive annual financial report. It should note that the GFOA is the highest form of recognition in the area of government accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by our government and its management. Please welcome Mr. Ray Reyes, Senior Director of Accounting. Last but certainly not least, we'd like to recognize our four new principals. First, we have Dr. Danielle Belton, new to the district and the principal at Ghent. Next, we have Mr. Dennis Holland. He served as an interim principal at Lindenwood Elementary. He's now been promoted to principal at Lindenwood Elementary. We now have Ms. Doris Langhorn, formerly the AP Assistant Principal at Northside Middle School, now the Site Coordinator at Madison. And lastly, we have Ms. Kirsten New, formerly the AP at Bayview Elementary, now the Principal at Willoughby Elementary, rather Willoughby. Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Sorry. Scoots in. They all went. Trim. Oops. They're not going to stay in the shed. All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Butts. We certainly want to congratulate our excellent administrators for all the awards and accolades that they bring to the division. These are just a few of the many that they receive year-round, and we want to be very supportive for our new administrators as they take on this leadership role. Next, it's time for the citizen comments on agenda and non-agenda items. When your name is called, please follow these steps. Come forward to the speaker's podium. The podium may be adjusted to suit your height. State your name and whether you have a child in Norfolk Public Schools or if you are employed by the system. State your position and give facts and other relevant data. If you represent a group or organization, ask the others to rise and be recognized. Please give any written statements or supporting material to the Deputy Clerk for the record. Speakers are limited to one appearance of 3 minutes. When the Deputy Clerk signals your time is up, please quickly wrap up your comments and be seated. The school board does not respond to citizen remarks at the time that they are given.
Madam Chairman, we have no one signed up for the speaking portion tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will move on to approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion by one of our board members to approve the consent agenda?
Madam Chair,
Sir?
I'd like to ask if the facilities usage report can be pulled and be part of the financial report later in the agenda, on the agenda. I have
Yes.
some questions about it.
Okay, all right, let's see here. The facility, okay, so pull that from the consent agenda.
All right, and it can,
Okay.
I would recommend it be during the financial report.
Does, any objections? Okay. All right, so Mr. Butts, we're going to pull that. So we will be voting on the other items that are on the consent agenda then. Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Okay. Does everybody understand what we've just agreed to? Just want to make sure. Okay. Then may we have a motion to approve the amended consent agenda?
Move that we approve the consent agenda as amended.
I second.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Jordan, can you repeat the motion that you just stated?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as amended.
Okay, and Ms. Basine has seconded that. Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Is there a question about?
Yes, in the last work session, the special session that we had last Wednesday, a matter of the will of the board regarding the school safety task force. I thought we would probably bring that up here, and if it's not in the consent agenda, I asked that it be added to the discussion agenda so that we could approve it. We talked about it in the last meeting, and we did the will of the board.
Okay. Then let's move to then approve the consent agenda, and then we can discuss that as we discuss, go on to the decision and the discussion agenda. Okay. Mr. Butts, can you call the roll for the consent agenda?
Ms. Basine?
Aye.
Ms. Campson?
Aye.
Mr. Clanton? Aye. Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan? Dr. Gabriel?
Aye. All right. Next on the agenda would be the decision and discussion for the monthly financial report, and then the other items which we have moved under that, Dr. Boone?
Facilities use.
Facility, right. We'll do the financial report first.
Yes, thank you. As Ms. Ingram comes to the podium, you will notice that you have 2 months. You know, we often talk about the 13th month for accounting purposes, and we begin to close out a year. So you see June and July financials as part of this report, and that's the reason for both. So, Ms. Ingram, thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Gabriel, Mr. Clanton, school board members. Dr. Boone, I'm sorry, good evening now. I'm going to give you a very high level of our June 30th financial report, and we have it as preliminary and unaudited. While we have closed the 12th accounting period and opened up the fiscal year, we are still in the process of preparing for the financial audit. And usually those adjustments are done in that 13th accounting period in the system that Dr. Boone has mentioned. So as of the end of June 30, our budget revenue received was $318,206,806 compared to a budget of $325,292,145. Some of that is related to our enrollment was less than what we budgeted for. Our March ADM was less. Some of the state revenue was less, as well as less money in federal dollars with impact aid. When they give you your first payment for impact aid in the past, they had typically given us like 80%. This year it went down to 50%. So there's a difference in the amount of money that we receive for impact aid. But going into this year and later on, they come back and make adjustments, and we will recoup some of those funds. Also, on the expenditure side, we expended $313,171,548. We cannot spend more than the revenue received, no matter what our budget is. If we do not actualize that full amount of the budget, we cannot spend it. Also, part of the difference in revenue received and expenditures is the debt service money that the city gives us. We call it construction technology and infrastructure. When they did the 2%, I think, real estate tax several years ago. They show us that in the revenue section is $3.6 million, and also on the expenditure side. So it is a wash. We don't get to spend it, so we show it on both sides. So the very high level, and like I said, we will still be getting ready for the auditor if they find anything, or if additional funds or invoice shows up that needs to be paid against next year. We'll be doing that in the 13th accounting period. And after the auditors come in and do their audit, we will bring back to you the official audited financial reports, and that's when they will present to the board as well for June 30. Any questions on the June 30 financials? Also, we have submitted to you, we do quarterly status of our grants report. Typically, I do not go over each one of the grants, but if you have any questions pertaining to any of the grants that were listed on that report, it gave you the status as of June 30 again. For those grants that closed on June 30, we're in the process of seeking reimbursement. For those federal funds that close out September 30, we have a plan to meet those requirements, as well as meeting the 85% requirements on our title grants. There is a spending plan so that when we get to September 30th, we will meet those obligations as well.
I have a general one. Is the 85% standard across the board?
It's for Title I especially. Fiscal year 2018 Title I monies that we received is a multi-year grant. By the end of September, we should have spent 85%, and we can get 15% carried over into the next year.
And where are we on that 85% spend out?
We're on target for spending down according to the plan that when we get to September 30, we would have met the 85%.
And the 17th budget, will that be totally spent out, the one that we were finished?
We have completed
That's
the
done.
17, yes.
Good job. Thank you.
And one more general question. Looking at the remaining balances here compared to the beginning balance, they do seem very nominal. Are we on track with these to ensure that whatever the required spend rate is, we're within that required threshold?
For the operating budget or the grants?
The grants.
Yes, we are.
Since you mentioned operating. What about operating?
Operating budget, if there are any funds left over that are unspent at the end of the year, there is a superintendent's memo that allows us to carry those funds over into this fiscal year, 2019. And the superintendent's memo from the state is very specific, and so if there are funds left, we will have to request that the city reappropriate that money back to us to spend. So we are looking at that. There were some funds left in textbooks and things like that that we can go. They specifically mentions textbook funds, that if you meet your requirements, that you can go back and ask it to be reappropriated to us. So
And that, excuse me, I'm sorry. In that example, it's reappropriated to textbooks also?
but textbooks, yes.
Okay.
There may be other state funds that you can get reappropriated to go generally, but the textbook line item must go to textbooks.
For the upcoming year, would it be possible when we get, these are quarterly reports, you said?
The grant ones?
The grant ones are quarterly reports. Would it be possible for, when you do the report out, each quarter you put what percentage of spend out level we are?
We plan to modify, this was been in existence for the previous year, but our budget director and I have been talking about modifying this report.
That would be helpful.
Percentage spending.
That would be much helpful, very helpful for me. Thank you very much.
This question might be for you or for Dr. Boone. We had talked about impact aid and potentially getting an update on any changes in strategies last year and how what our process, how it's impacted our process, and do we need to look at that for this coming year as we get ready to start the new school year? I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yes, we can. We have seen what the, we did put in place some new strategies, worked with some outside consultants, and we've done some things. And we did see an increase, a nominal increase in student participation. And so therefore our dollars are up a little bit overall. But as Ms. Ingram said, when the first payment came, we're used to getting an 80% payment, and we only received a 50% payment. So that, again, this is, it's federal impact aid. And, you know, in a couple of iterations of the White House budget has been set to eliminate impact aid, but again, we continue to work toward that. And so, yes, we can certainly provide information on what that total stream looked like this year, last year.
And we've been meeting with staff within the next couple of weeks, looking at strategies and seeing what we can do differently. But one of the drawbacks with doing impact aid is participation of return rate from our high school, parents of high school students. Even when we went back and did a second, we had the first one because we have to have the deadline, I believe, in January to do the first submission. And we go back out and do the same thing, trying to recoup additional cards. And it's typically those high school, secondary students or families that do not return the cards back. And it's based on them returning the cards, completing it correctly, and signing it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Report is our July financial reports. The first month of this fiscal year, we received revenue at the end of July of $29 million, or 8.8% of the total budget, and it compares to 6.3% for the same time period last year and 7.4% in fiscal year 2017. On the expenditure side, at the end of July, expenditures and encumbrances or open purchase orders, $11.9 million, or 3.6% of the total budget. And that compares to 1.6% for the same time period last year and 3.9% for fiscal year 2017. And the next slide that shows you is pretty much the same information that on the first two slides, but it shows the different categories as to where the funds are obligated and where the monies have been received in. And any footnotes to compare, to show variances from year to year has been submitted on that report. There were no budget transfers in the month of July because we physically cannot do them in the system because we still have June open the same time. But you can do expenditures. That concludes the financial reports for July.
Thank you.
So then I think there were questions about the facilities report, since Ms. Ingram serves as financial and operations officer.
Okay, I didn't know, so we're not going to do a motion on that?
A motion to amend the agenda?
No, I'm saying we don't vote on the financial report?
Sure, we can do that, and then we can move on to the facilities report individually. That's fine. Do I have a motion on the floor to approve the monthly financial report as presented?
Move to approve the monthly financial report as presented.
Second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded.
Ms. Basine?
Aye.
Ms. Campson?
Aye.
Mr. Clanton?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Dr. Gabriel?
Aye. Now on to the use of the school facilities report.
Got the floor?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to, I'm looking at the July report, the July 2018. And as you know, we spend a lot of time updating the policy around the fees and so forth. And I was trying to follow it. It was a little hard, but I just want to get some sense around how we're doing with consistent implementation of the policy. So when I was looking through it, it looks like going all the way to the bottom of the column where you have 0, 0, that's just extra zeros, right? That doesn't correspond with the Boo Williams. The Boo Williams is $25, is that correct? One up?
Right. That line probably, that 0, 0 probably should not have been there.
Okay. So I just wanted to raise some attention to, I just couldn't follow the consistency. So the Boo Williams Norfolk Express was in the gym for 22 days and they paid $25. We had Hampton Roads AYF in an auditorium at Lake Taylor for 3 days. And then, of course, they needed custodial support. So it just didn't seem like there was some consistency there. And so I just wanted to kind of reinforce that if this is within the policy, then fine. If it's not within the policy, that we make sure that we are alerting the staff, new principals, and so forth, what the policy is, so that we don't find ourselves all over the place as we found ourselves previously.
The administrative fee is like an application fee that's basically, for most people, there are certain things, even in the policy, that waive that administrative fee. But then depending upon what activity is they're being held, they may not need custodial services. Or they may be finished before they may need security services. Within that time span that our custodial staff is at the building. So that could be some differentiation as to why some may have the custodial there and some don't.
Yeah, I'm comfortable. If you are comfortable, okay. I'm just trying to make sure that we're paying attention to that policy and implementing it with fidelity. That's all.
And we can certainly look into that particular line item to give more specific information.
Ms. Basine?
I had a similar question about that, because so you're saying that administrative fee is pretty much across the board to everyone. And I asked that because in the June report, so
there are
therapeutic.
Exceptions. In the policy itself,
right.
There are some exceptions to that application fee.
Okay, so our intervention services, for instance, they wouldn't fall under, I guess I'll have to go back and look at the policy, but I had similar questions about consistency, and that may be very well what the policy dictates, but I just thought the intervention services, I'm in June now, yeah, sorry. I didn't see
We'll go
that. Like
back
YCAP, hold on, let me pull it back. It's like the new YCAP and, oh wait, therapeutic interventions.
Oh, are you saying that you thought that they were waived because they were providing services?
I thought they were, yeah, I thought they were waived, and even of the administrative fee, but I see that they look like, if I'm reading, it's small, it looks like they are charged an administrative fee.
That seems to be all that they are charged.
Okay, yeah, that is all that they're charged.
Yes.
But, okay.
And again, these are probably, when the intervention services, again, the therapeutic day, these are probably those that are beyond the school day, more in the afternoon, after the close of the school day.
Okay.
And so, again, so that's what triggers the $25.
All right, well, that makes sense
Those
to me.
services that are part of the school day where the therapists are in there, we don't assess them any fees for being in there during the day.
Okay, well, that clarifies. That was my question. Or that's what I didn't understand. Okay.
Madam, and just one final comment on that. So I know we talked about the importance of the custodian, making sure that's taken care of, but the other thing that we had talked about was when we have folks inside of the facilities, whether or not they use, like our tissue and towels and all those kind of things, to make sure that stuff is covered. And that was what we were trying to get at, not so much trying to charge exorbitant fees to the community, but at least trying to make sure that we weren't hurting the schools, because school will open and then we'll find out that we're short of supplies because folks have been in the gym and using things. So That's all I'm trying to get at.
Right, because at one point last year, we did pull together some information on how much our buildings are being used and how the increase in custodial supplies. But that's contingent upon the principal having the applicant complete the application correctly, because that kicks in at a number of, I think, people who they're expecting at their meeting or that activity. That's when that custodial fee kicks in. So if that application is not filled out properly and doesn't say it meets that match, then our staff won't charge a fee because it's not put in there that there is, I think it's 75. If we don't meet that number, then we don't charge a custodial fee. So if it's not on the application, we take it that the party is less than 75, so our staff don't charge a custodial fee.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of that is contingent upon the application being filled out correctly at the building level.
Thank you, Dr. Gabriel and the board, for allowing that discussion.
Do I have a motion on the floor to approve the school facilities report, use of school facilities report?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the school facilities report.
I second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Mr. Putz?
Miss, excuse me, Miss Basine,
Aye.
Miss Campson,
Aye.
Mr. Clanton,
Aye.
Miss Smith,
Aye.
Miss Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Jordan,
Aye.
Dr. Gabriel.
Aye. Great. Okay, let's move on to item 6.02, the crisis plan certifications.
Thank you, Dr. Gabriel. Before, or as Mr. Walker and Dr. Harold Lands are approaching the podium, let me share a statement with the board and with the public. Norfolk Public Schools would like to acknowledge the error that resulted in the information of some students and staff being compromised. The information in question did not include actual medical records, student ID numbers, or social security numbers. It did, however, address medical needs as they related to issues of mobility and other challenges that first responders would need to be aware of when coordinating the safe transport of students and staff during an evacuation or other crisis. For example, detailed information on student A could have included specifics on an anxiety disorder that required extra care to be taken when evacuating a building, or employee B who may have been listed as having diabetes or high blood pressure. This knowledge is critical in the event a crisis plan has to be executed. While the information is necessary for the comprehensive plans, it was incorrectly posted for public view, and for that, the administration apologizes for the error. The information was to have been placed on the private domain area board docs, a platform used to manage materials for school board meetings, but was instead placed on the public domain. We have sought the advice of our legal counsel and have had internal conversations since the issue was brought to our attention in an effort to address the situation. We absolutely take the privacy of students and staff seriously. We have been thoughtful in our approach to identifying where the breakdown in the process that led to the breach occurring and in the remedying the situation. As we seek guidance from legal counsel in collaboration with the Family Compliance Office that enforces FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, I assure you, as your superintendent, our corrective action will include reaching out to all affected parties. We are committed to improving processes going forward and sincerely appreciate your understanding and continued support of Norfolk Public Schools. By state requirement, each year, the school board is to approve and certify that plans have been presented for this work. It's also important to let you know, as part of our overall school safety and emergency response efforts, we work very closely with the city's emergency management department led by Jim Reddick, and we're at the table both with planning as well as actions related to any storm-related issues or any other type of emergency that we have the opportunity to plan and collaborate with. And so this evening, Dr. Harold Lands, the Senior Director for Student Support Services, and Mr. Anthony Walker, our Director of School Safety and Security, will walk you through the requirements of the plan and where we are.
Good evening, Dr. Gabriel, Mr. Clanton, Dr. Boone, members of the board. We will share with you information this evening regarding the annual requirement for the review of our school crisis plans by the school board. Start with sharing details with you about the federal requirements first. As you saw in your packet, and you'll notice in the presentation, that in order for us to remain compliant with the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, because we receive federal funding, we're responsible for making sure that we have crisis plans in place and that we review those annually. Each school board is responsible for having this particular exercise where we conduct an annual review, where you have the opportunity to be assured that the school division has plans at every school and facility, and that we ensure that those plans are rehearsed and practiced as we do throughout the school year. And so part of this requirement is that the superintendent of schools will certify, using the website as noted by the Department of Criminal Justice Services, that an actual review of these plans was conducted. And we'll note in the presentation that these plans are fluid plans and that there are adjustments that are made accordingly throughout the year. Next, we'll share information with you about the state requirements for this particular review of the plans, and you'll note that the Code of Virginia 22.1-279.8 involves school safety audits and school crisis emergency management, and that each school board will ensure that these plans are developed, that there are written crisis plans for each school, and that they are consistent with the appropriate practices. And it will also note that each of these plans we're responsible for providing with the appropriate law enforcement, first responders within our city, as it will note our chief of police, the fire chief, as well as the person in charge of medical services, and as Dr. Boone mentioned, through Dr. Reddick's office as well. So we do follow those particular practices and share those information, the information with those parties, and work very closely with each of those agencies. Next, we'll just share a little bit about the certification requirements. So there is a requirement that the plans must be reviewed and must be submitted for approval by the August 31st deadline. So each year, the school district shares information with the school board, and by the August 31st requirement, we have this actual process take place. And then, as noted, after this is certified and after the information is approved, and Dr. Boone would be required to enter this information on the website, the plans will be distributed to the parties noted there, as I shared earlier, the chief of police, our fire chief, and the director of medical services. There are a few notes that we'll share with you about the review of the plans, and some notes for you as board members, that as I shared earlier, that the state acknowledges that school districts will look at these as fluid plans and will modify them throughout the year. So there are many times where the appropriate staff members in the school district actually look at the plans. They meet with building administrators and the teams at the schools, and they are modified as their staff changes as well, or changes that occur with the plans in the schools. And there is also a requirement that every school has specific practice drills that they have to do, and those are conducted within the first 20 days of the start of the school year. And so as those drills are conducted, and even between now and the time our staff members return over the next couple of weeks, there may be modifications to the plans, particularly if there are cases where there are staff members that have to be updated, or as there are students that we learned additional information about. And as noted there, it allows for the modification for those plans, and our security services staff actually meets with schools, and they are available throughout the year for additional assistance and training, and will also reach out to schools if there are specific areas of concern that need to be addressed. There's ongoing training as well. Next, we will share with you the chart that provides specific details about each of the schools listed in our district, and you'll notice the columns across the top that for the 2018-19 plans, it notes a variety of things, such as the crisis team coordinators in each school, the crisis team members, the evacuation sites. I won't read all of them for you, but what happens with the plans is that the information is reviewed, and those particular categories are noted in this chart. And you'll see that it's a two-page document, so that it won't be quite as small as it has been in the past. But there are specific areas that we point out on that particular document. That's the general overview of how the process works and how we have handled the annual school crisis plan requirement for the state. And if you have any specific questions for us, Mr. Walker and I are available to answer those for you.
Are there any questions from the board? Ms. Bassi?
Has what's required of the state, has it changed over time, either in response to what's happening in the school buildings, what's happening in school districts, across the nation? And additionally, has there been any discussion about, and the plans may already address this, but with, and I know we address it in our suicide prevention policy, but, attempts made in the school building. Is that incorporated in these crisis plans as well?
Well, let me answer that for you. Again, to everyone, I'm Anthony Walker, Director of Safety and Security. Now, it hasn't been exactly in these plans, but what we are building throughout the state, the constant meeting with directors like myself and public safety directors, where we're meeting and addressing issues, mainly in the area of active shooters and issues involving mental illness. So they're being incorporated as strategies throughout, the state, and we're working very closely with DCJS. There's a lot of training going on, which we're privy to attend.
And I was just curious, when was the last time a school safety audit was conducted? Have we had one recently?
Last year. It's every year.
Every year the audit is done?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. That's it.
That's going to be it. Well, I got a comment then, so if I may. So one, I appreciate a statement that Dr. Boone shared earlier, the work that I know they've been doing over the last 48, 72 hours, trying to address the concerns that came forward. Actually, personally appreciate the pilot for alerting us. I think that that was a good thing, and for them to be willing to share the concern with us to try to make sure that in their coverage that they did not continue an issue. And I know we are going to receive additional follow-up from the superintendent, and so I just want to make sure it's clear we're not ignoring the challenges that we have before us, and that we'll continue to work on it and look at ways as a board that we can make sure that we do our part, as well as support the administration in the work that they're doing.
You have a comment, Ms. Martin.
Okay. I have my master's degree specializes in disaster science management. I previously worked at Homeland Security and counterterrorism training, and have worked on research in this area with collaboration of for the Hampton Roads region. And one of the things that I would like to see, if this hasn't happened, because it really hasn't been publicized, I would like to see some more collaborative exercises going on. I'm also CERT certified, so I've got kind of a background in this, and I have children in the schools, so I have a real concern. And so, I'd like to see you all take an active role in some of these regional exercises and local exercises, so that if we do have a larger incident that it goes beyond to the school, that you have some procedures in place, some MOUs in place, and so forth.
I think that is, in response to that, you were exactly right. And as a result, we're having conversation with Jim Reddick and his team, where we're going to incorporate not only for the school district, but all of the emergency management folk coming together to actually put some of our plans with theirs. So we're have a collaborative effort.
Well, and I know some of the schools have been designated as shelters, animal shelters, things like that. And so I think the board would I think I speak for the board that we'd really like to be more informed on when these exercises are happening, and to really highlight that you guys are taking, being more proactive in the safety of our schools and our communities. So thank you for the work you're doing.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair. Sure. I follow up with that. So, first of all, I didn't know that Ms. Martin had all those credentials, so that's good to know. Jim Reddick has, I was at a meeting this week. They have a State of Norfolk Emergency Preparedness and Response Strategic Planning team, and he had invited, I guess, community members and others from around the city to come together and kind of provide some input. And I was just like, and one of the things that came up was the role of the schools, but I knew from the work that we've done in the past with the hurricanes and so forth that there is that communication. But if you aren't aware of that strategic committee, I think it would be great for you to consider being a part of that, because we had a meeting for about an hour and a half, I think it was Monday, and very thorough conversation, and talked about the regional collaboration, looking at schools, neighborhoods, and all of that. So when you said that, I just want to make sure that you and the board was aware that that effort is out there.
Thank you.
Further discussion or questions? Then is there a motion to approve the crisis plan certifications?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the crisis plan certification as presented.
Second.
Ms. Basine?
Aye.
Ms. Campson?
Aye.
Mr. Clanton?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Dr. Gabriel?
Aye. Okay. So before we go further, thank you very much. Before we go any further, it was brought to my attention that we did discuss the Safety Schools Task Force at our last work session, or at our previous meeting that we held in discussion of a few of the board items. There is a desire to have this voted on tonight, since we had previously discussed it. But before we do that, we need to amend the agenda. And so what I'd like to do is hear if there's a motion to amend the agenda to allow the Safety Schools Task Force to be item 6.04 onto the agenda for a motion and discussion.
Okay. Madam Chair, I move that we add item 6.04, the School Safety Task Force.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Is this to add it for discussion, or are we discussing right now? I guess I know we talked about it last week, but can we delve in a little further about what the scope of that task force will be? I guess I'm weary about instituting or directing the superintendent to put together a task force with no real scope of what, or, expectations around what that task force hopes to achieve.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if it might be beneficial to do it in the form of a resolution then. It's kind of similar to the school start times. It's an initiative that the board wants to proceed with. I heard clearly that it was the will of the board. So maybe so that can be further developed, we can proceed with acknowledging the will of the board and then pursuing the development of that task force, so we can put it forth as a resolution. Would you all be?
Scope of the task
The
force.
the scope?
And
scope.
come
The
back at
scope?
our September meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I would like
Or-
to,
Would that be?
And detail it.
So we are acknowledging that that is something that the board wants to pursue, and that we would further develop the scope of what that task force would be.
Madam Chair,
Mm-hmm.
what's the timeline for this discussion? Because, as we all know, we have no security in any of our elementary schools. This is a priority for me. I thought we had the will of the board at the meeting last time to have the discussion and vote tonight.
And Ms. Campson, it was a good topic to bring up, very relevant. We know that safety is a very important concern of the administration. And I would say that the timeline, it's whether we have consensus to move forward with the task force, that is going to start. I don't think that's going to delay any decision-making as far as getting the work together. But we have to come to an agreement first tonight on pursuing that, which we did at the last one, but this is the formal agreement
right.
going forward.
Madam Chair? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Just to clarify for myself,
Mhm.
so what we're doing now is deciding to discuss it tonight or deciding to postpone the discussion until the next meeting?
We are going to vote on it tonight, the resolution to pursue a school safety task force. This is a part of the discussion. Well, the discussion right now is to amend the agenda, actually. That's our discussion right now. And I was clarifying Ms. Bassine's comment, whether we amend the agenda so that we put forth a resolution versus voting on the school safety task force to put it through. So, sorry if that's a little confusing, but what we first need to do is figure out if we can put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
So, let's determine that first.
So we have a motion on the floor, motion and second.
Is there a motion on the floor to amend the agenda for discussion and vote of the school safeties task force? Can I call for the vote?
Ms. Basine?
I'm still unclear, I'm
We're-
sorry.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
We're voting on a motion to amend the agenda to add 6.04, to amend the agenda, because that's still the motion that I made
Okay,
originally. So we're going to
just
vote
so
on that.
that we can discuss
Yeah.
it.
So we
Okay,
can
then
discuss
aye.
it.
Ms. Campson?
Aye.
Mr. Clanton?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Dr. Gabriel?
Aye. Okay. So now that we have properly put it on the agenda, now we can move to have it discussed. First of all, let's have a motion. Is there a motion on the floor to, suggestion?
Yeah, we're going to go back to matters of the board now, and then we'll come back to that item, because to go back to the,
Yeah, we added it as
6.04.
6.04.
Sorry.
You're good.
Thank you. All right. So let's move on to matters of the board then. Okay, so under matters of the board, was it last week that we had our discussion on the code of ethics for school board members, governance norms and protocols, and what you see before you. I'm pulling it up what you should see before you is a red line version and a clean version of some of the items that were discussed. Now, I do realize that some of the material that was sent out as far as the norms and ethics, as far as the feedback, was delayed. And so I can understand if you want to provide additional feedback based on what you receive. If you would like to hold on moving forward on adopting that as a board, I certainly am sensitive to that. However, what you have before you are the governance norms and protocols and the code of ethics. So are there any questions or items of discussion that you have for these items that would preclude you from, oh, thank you, from voting on them? Yes.
Well, so first off, I'm looking at the governance norms and protocols. I have some concerns about some of the edits that were made that were not discussed last week.
Okay.
Let's. And aren't clearly indicated on the draft, on the red line draft that is uploaded. So, I don't know if you're looking at that.
Okay. Can you describe those edits, Ms. Basine?
Yes, so of particular concern is under under protocols, item T, under data requests. The previous version did not indicate that data requests be made directly to the chair and vice chair. It was just the chair. And vice chair was added without it looking like an edit here. So, and that's in the first sentence and the second sentence, if I'm not mistaken. I am not in support of that. I would like the wording changed back to the original.
Okay.
And honestly, not having time to look at these red line versions, would like the opportunity to ensure that other such edits were not made. So would like additional time to review it.
Sure, I understand that. And again,
That makes sense.
We apologize for the miscommunication. It was our expectation to have them out on Friday, and things happen. And so, is there anybody else that would mind having a little bit of extra time to review them?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would support that, because in addition to what Ms. Basine just mentioned, I'm also under norms and protocols. The item that says we'll be mindful of the governing role of the school board and entrust the day-to-day operation of the school system to the superintendent. We had agreed to strike the language interfere with day-to-day operations, but I thought we came up with some.
We came up with leave the day-to-day operations of the school system to the
I
superintendent.
can't remember. I just thought it was some affirming language that we came up with.
Yeah.
The following one says that if dealing with information shared with one board member will be shared with all members. If considerable work or time is required to generate data, a majority vote of 4 members must endorse the request. So there we have 4. But down at the bottom, we have 5. So I think there's some inconsistencies here.
Right.
And it would be good to have, we have the existing norms and protocols as they are. We have the revisions that we had based upon the training. And then this should be a third set based upon our work session. And I think we need to be able to make sure that we can follow from the original that exists in each version to make sure that we're following the red line, what the baseline is for the red line.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, it'd be good. Ms. Basine?
Yeah, and additionally, just similar to my comment about, the task force, and I said that, as I said in last week's meeting, I need a better understanding of what the school board member guide is going to include, because we talked about last week, we have, as part of the policy manual that's on board docs, like our policy manual, there are areas where we can include certain items, but at this point, I'm not clear on what those items would be to go into the member guide. And I realized as we were talking last week, terms like standard operating procedures, SOPs, and then I feel like we're all thinking of it in a different way. Because what I honestly not clear what it is, that I'm hesitant to adopt norms or protocols that incorporate that without knowing what they even are. So I'm not, at this point in time, in support of including that here.
Madam Chair, if I may. And I appreciate the comments that are made there, as we've had several discussions around the board member guide, which is not new to this board. It's been around for a while. I would just like to get general consensus of the will of the board, because I'm hearing a lot of unreadiness tonight, if we might possibly be able to move this to the 12th for action. I know that Ms. Martin and myself, who stepped up to work on the member guide, have already started to look at that, and we're very much in the being very transparent about it, to share the ideas and suggestions around it with the board. So if we had general consent to the will of the board to move with September 12th, to be able to look at the norms, but we'll also get you a copy that we've shared out as far as the member guide and where we're going with that, because there's some things we're actually looking at cutting out and so forth.
Yeah, if I may, I'm comfortable with that, but I also want to provide some historical context. So there was a school board membership guide, and as the board was going through training, this is when Dr. King was still here, we looked at it and we were concerned about the membership guide, because at that time, to be honest about it, we were not governing very well through policy. So, all this work that we've been talking about with Quinn and all that, and working with VSBA, was geared around trying to get the board to focus on its role around policy, having the administration do regulations and so forth. So we agreed to set the membership guide aside because it was causing some challenges for us as we were trying to get things together. So I'm just trying to reaffirm that, to me, in your review, we need to look at the existing policies that we have. I think, to the extent that there is such a thing as regulations guiding the procedures of the board, that we should try to put those operating procedures or regulations inside the policy, and then all that stuff falls and flows within board docs. So if somebody has a question about something, we do that, and then your guide would be, or the guide would be, anything that would fall outside of that didn't make sense, that wasn't aligned to our policy work and the regs, would then fall within such a guide. But we have norms, we have protocols, we have policies, and we have regs, and really that should cover the bulk of what we do.
And Madam Chair, if I may,
Okay.
and you're probably thinking the same thing in the respect, there's a difference between policy and protocol. Policy is it's the policy. This is what we do it. The protocol gets into how we do it. And so being able to have something, and we've talked about, especially as new board members kind of looking at it, very much having a guidebook in place that dictated protocol, how we do things, would help with continuity and being with the onboarding. I understand that we have board docs and where we can house it, because it can very well be housed in board docs. But I think that we just have an opportunity, because there is a guidebook already in place. We have colleagues that are looking at it, being able to definitely take in the comments and the history that you provided, and to be able to see what we're doing with it. I think just give us an opportunity to present.
Okay, well, I think getting the draft would help.
Yeah, I want to add to that, because it has been set aside for so long, it has some really outdated information about even appointed versus elected, and really when you look at the policies, any reference to the policy, like it still has no child left behind and it hasn't been updated with ESSA. So it's really policies concerning the broader environment, not necessarily NPS policies. So the broader environment in which we work and how they relate to our policies. So as a guidebook, it's really just general information that, of course, again, it'd be nice to update, so that because as new board members, the new elects, we weren't really given a guidebook, and I found it just going through it very useful. There's some information in there that was very well explained. So those are the types of issues that we're dealing with that.
And I'm comfortable with the suggestion. I just want to make sure that we are aligned with our norms and protocols. So, for example, we're having a conversation around how does something get on the agenda, and so we're looking at that within our norms and protocols. So, having a better feel for what you feel is missing might inform gaps that we have in our norms and protocols versus having a separate operating procedure. Ideally, what we're doing now, as part of the onboarding, we would have done that and tried to get to that, but, things happen. But I note the value of what you're saying. I just want to make sure that we don't find ourselves again with separate documents that we're trying to maintain, because that's how we got into the challenge that we had before.
Also, Carlos and I did talk at our meeting yesterday about where to place this document as we're working through it, and we both agreed that Board Docs is the best place since we're all on it, and it gives each of us an opportunity to go in and make comments and really work together and make sure that we're not creating two different procedures.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we table a discussion regarding board norms, the code of conduct, and board violations until our September 12th meeting.
Okay.
Second.
All right. We need to do a vote. Call for a vote.
Ms. Basine?
Aye.
Ms. Campson?
Aye.
Mr. Clanton?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Dr. Gabriel?
Aye. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead on to item 6.04, the Safe Schools Task Force. So would we be, Ms. Campson, yes?
Oh, I thought we were getting ready to start the discussion.
Yes, so as we left the discussion last week, there was will of the board to move forward with a Safe Schools Task Force for a variety of reasons. I am suggesting, based on some of the feedback that we've just had, to put forth a resolution stating that we move forward with a Safe Schools Task Force with the purpose of working out a scope with outcomes and reporting back to the board on what those items would be that we're looking for. Discussion.
Well, as we all know, we have in our priorities, priority 3 has to do with keeping our schools safe. Our of the 3 goals in our accountability plan, goal 2 has to do with safe and secure schools. In addition to that, we all know what's happening in our country now. As a longtime elementary school teacher and principal, I had many incidences, and not just worrying about terrorists, but worrying about one evening we were having family movie and a popcorn night, and I had children go into the back of our auditorium. The old Ocean View School had a door that went right out because it used to be used as a movie theater, letting in members of the Latin Kings. I was the person that had to go and confront the gang members so I could get them out of my building. I asked for security, at least for night functions. I was told, you're the security. And so we used our own money to hire people for the evenings. But today, we still have all of our elementary schools with no security. When we all came in here today and you opened the front door downstairs, what was the first thing you saw? A security guard. So we're safe. But in 3 weeks, if you have a 6-year-old, you're going to send them into a school that has no security. And so I think that even though we've made great strides in Norfolk, we have buzzer systems, the new schools have the double entry, security entry that I worked so hard to have put into them, but there's always room for improvement. And so I think that this culture, what's ever happening in our country today, is important enough that we need to do what so many school districts across the country are doing, is they're creating a task force, which is a limited period of time, to include the superintendent and her senior, certainly our new security person, and the police force, the fire department, the emergency people, the U.S. Navy. We just saw Virginia Beach do this last year. They started their task force. They reported back in 3 or 4 months with their recommendations. The task force dissolved. The superintendent and their board moved on, and they've already started implementing those recommendations. And that's what I feel that our city needs too. Our children need it. I mean, I think we should be demanding it. And here we have someone sitting on our board who would also be the representative of the board there with all this background, that she can, a direct person that would be there with all those other people. I think it's just really important. I knocked on thousands of doors during the election, and the number one concern that I heard home after home at rallies were, what is Norfolk doing to keep my child safe? A parent should never have to worry when their child goes out that door to school that they may not come home. And we need to show our parents and our citizens that we will do everything we can possibly do, and we will bring in all the experts in our city and our own expert to make it possible. And this is something that happens quick. You create your task force, you give them a timeline. The timeline I put on the information I gave to the board when I suggested this last week was reporting out by December or by January, so that then we could get to work implementing the recommendation. First deciding the ones that we were going with, prioritize them, and start implementing them.
Okay.
So
That's a good overview. Okay. And I don't think, Ms. Campson, I hear you, and I know that the concerns that you heard during that time are very valid. But certainly, we do not want to leave here thinking that that there isn't a day that goes by that our staff is not thinking about the security of our students, because I know that they are.
Absolutely
they
are.
are, and I know that was your first priority as a building leader, and I know that's everybody's, and I know that's Dr. Boone's priority. First and foremost, I know she says from the moment the babies leave their house and get on the bus until the babies are brought back to home, that's our number one charge as school board members, with academics as a close second. But sorry, did you have a question, Mr. Jordan?
I think Ms. Basine did, but I
Okay.
do have a
Let me just
comment.
finish this thought. So I wanted to just make that statement real quick. Ms. Basine?
Dr. Gabriel, I appreciate you making that statement. I want to echo that, and the indication or assertion that, you know, our schools don't have, our elementary schools don't have security. I think that is an area that I would like to see all board members become more knowledgeable about, what we do have. I'm certainly absolutely not opposed to safe schools. I don't think anybody sitting up here is. I don't think that anybody on the previous board was, and the boards before that. And that's the reason why it is a goal of ours. And we have been working hard, multiple levels, to address those issues, and certainly evolve as things that are happening in the broader community also occur and evolve. So I'm not opposed to a task force. I, want to know what the scope of it is, because we are going to be directing staff time to that work, including our own, and again, also asking the community to be involved and engaged around that work. Some of which I believe is happening, and again, about making sure that the full board is knowledgeable about the work that's already underway, whether it be through our alternative ed study and the ongoing work around that, which the previous board took initiative on, also as part of our educational planning work that we've been engaged in, where school safety is certainly a piece of that as well. And so there are, it is not, those discussions are not happening. They are happening. They're happening every day. And as we get ready for the school year, I know that they're happening. We talked about one aspect of it today. And when I asked about the safety audit earlier, I'd like more knowledge. I'd like to learn more about what is included in that safety audit. Are some of the items that we may be thinking about as being part of the task force? Are we already doing some of that work? I mean, I think there's a lot to learn about what we are already doing before we task the superintendent and her team to engage in another task force. when some of that work may already be done.
Gordon had a.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you like, I can yield.
Okay,
Ms.
Ms.
Campson.
Campson, if you want to.
Did you want to say something?
Part of the role of a task force is to do the survey and see what's already in place and what needs to be done. That would be one of the roles of the task force, is to bring all the different things that are happening. Different schools are doing different things based on what the principal's putting in place, and that's the first thing that a task force would do, is do the survey. And if you bring people in like the U.S. Navy, who knows more about how secure our schools are? Who knows more about doing stuff like that? So, once again, I think that this is something that's very, very important for the safety of our children. We need that kind of survey, because I know Dr. Boone is doing a lot of things to keep our children safe. The principals and the teachers are doing a lot of things to keep the children safe. It's uneven from school to school. The security that's furnished is very uneven. As I said, no elementary school in the city has security. So that's
All right. All right.
Dr. Boone, if I can, before you go. So I think we're all over the map in terms of this process. My understanding of what we were discussing at the work session, we were beginning to go down the path of talking about board goals. And in the context of the board goals, I thought Ms. Campson appropriately brought forward something in writing for the board to consider as part of our discussion around goals. And then we had the conversation around the task force. My understanding that we were having that conversation around the task force within the context of the board working on its goals, and of which safety and security is one. When we worked on formed the policy committee, we pulled up some best practices, and we went through a process by which task forces may arise through that. We referenced a book by McAdams, I believe it is, What School Boards Can Do. And as part of that process, we identified that there were situations where, superintendent may make some recommendations, superintendent may charter a task force, the board committee may recommend, or the board may charter a task force if it found that it was relating only to board matters. We were just having a discussion a moment ago around norms, protocols, and standard operating procedures. It would seem to me somewhere in there would be a discussion, well, how does the board go about the process of establishing a task force? Right now, we're kind of doing it a little ad hoc. And so I'm not necessarily opposed to the concept that's being put forward, but I do think doing a task force right now is premature. I think we need to finish what we've started with our goals, talk about our norms and protocols. If we're coming forward with standard operating procedures, we can ask those that are working on that to consider the process for establishing a task force as a part of that, if we're not going to continue with what we've been using in terms of the discussion as relates to the policy committee work. And I think what would be a more appropriate approach to this would be to simply ask the superintendent to come and give the board an update on where we are with our security and all the things that are being discussed. And as part of that, as we just talked about, likely would include relationships that we just talked about with the national emergency or the city's emergency task force, the relationships that's going on with the police department, the courts. There are a lot of things that are going on, and I think some of this is just unfamiliarity. And so it would be a good opportunity for this entire board to first be brought up to speed on what exists. And if we see that there are gaps, that may feed into our goals and other things that we would want to put forward. But I think the very first step should be find out what exists and ask the superintendent to come back and give us an update on that. And then from that, we can then determine whether or not a task force is warranted and what the scope is and who should be on it and so forth, to put the task force before you have the information, I don't think is the best method for us to go down this road.
Mr. Clayton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to address one. I think we're kind of relitigating this entire discussion from what we had last week, and we had a vote of just a general will of the board, and we said that we would move forward. I do want to address this ad hoc comment that was made, that our rules of order, which is our actual policy, BDDE, would be our rules of order, which states that we were going through the appropriate process, which would be a motion. And I agree with the recommendation from Ms. Basine in the respect of coming back and creating a resolution which would define a lot of those other things. I think also in the process of consulting with the superintendent to find out that information. And so with that, just kind of rounding this up, this discussion if possible, I'd like to move today that we come back on the 12th with a formulated resolution that dictates the scope, that talks about the membership, and the report out for a school safety task force at that time, and that we take that up, take that action up. A second.
Is there a second? Take that up.
Is there a second?
Come back and talk about it again.
The vote on the resolution.
So are we voting on?
The resolution to talk about the scope, the membership, and the reporting. It's taking action on it.
So
We come back on the 12th and do that.
talk about it again and then come back in 2 or 3 weeks and.
Once we get the report, then we can talk about whether or not we're going to go forward with the task force, is what I'm understanding.
No, I'm saying today that we come back on the 12th with the resolution which will build out what this task force looks like.
So we will vote.
Today. And we're going to come back on the 12th and vote on the
12th
resolution.
whether we're going to have a task force.
No, build out what the task force looks like, the resolution.
Clock's ticking. Tick-tock.
I'm trying to move it.
I know you are, but
So-
I'm feeling like.
Okay, let's, Dr. Boone,
I
I know
have
you
a
had.
comment. Before we move to what Mr. Clanton has said, I would like to have a report on what the administration is currently doing. Over and over again, it's being stated that there is nothing, but no consideration has been given to this administration to show us whether or not something is actually being done. And I think that they deserve that before we move forward with this.
Okay, all right,
That type of consideration should be given to them.
okay. Dr. Boone, was there something that you had wanted to?
Yeah, a
mention?
while back, just a couple of things. One, we have been doing some technical upgrades, and we certainly have already started putting together, based on some of the earlier conversations and information, of what we're doing. But let me give you 2 examples of what's underway. Radios have been replaced. We're moving from analog cameras, security cameras in our buildings, to the digital ones, which have much better, the video is much clearer and a better quality than what we have in the analog. Jesse Zamora, our technology department, is working closely with facilities and Mr. Walker as we do those upgrades. There's one clarification I do need to make on security officers. Our K-8 schools, Crossroads, Southside STEM, 3-8 at ADL and Lindenwood do have security officers.
Oh, Lindenwood. All right, well, Ms. Barnes, did you have a comment? No? Okay.
I'm afraid to comment.
Okay, all right.
Not afraid to, but,
Let's do this. I think there's value to a task force. I think there's value to bringing in the community in this discussion and listening to what maybe their concerns are, or perhaps some of their thoughts on things that are being done or things that are not being done. But I think that if we move forward with this, it will provide us a framework for bringing in a report from the superintendent, concerns from the community, a chance for our school board to address an issue that is a priority that we have listed in our accountability plan, and certainly something that has surfaced in this day and age. So I think we should move forward with it and incorporate the comments that have been made about getting the baseline information on what we are currently doing so that we can move forward with items that will need to be implemented, modified, or enhanced. So let me put forward this resolution then. Resolve to move forward with the Safe Schools Task Force with further development of the scope, the desired outcomes, and assessment of current practices with a timeline for reports.
Second.
Are we having discussion on that? Is that a motion in a second?
Oh, I'll
Yes.
put forth that as a motion.
May I?
Sure.
So, normally we would have this discussion at a work session, and then we would bring it forward to a business meeting. I thought previously we were talking about doing something on the 12th. So, is your motion in the second that we now have different from what was previously being discussed in regards to coming back on the 12th?
Yes, it is.
Well, I just, again, I'm going to be voting no. I think we are substituting our judgment for the superintendent. We talked earlier in the workshop about, micromanaging. I just think we are not qualified. It sounds like in that motion, we're going to then make the determination of who's going to be on the task force and who's not. I don't think that is appropriate governance and process, but if the board chooses to go down that path, that's the will of the board, but I'm going to be against it.
Ms. Campson?
If the board agrees on a policy about safe schools, then the board can direct. Certainly, I'm not saying that I need to set up the task force. That's why we have a superintendent. I'm saying that I'm asking the board to pass or vote on the establishment of the task force as part of our policy, and then leave the day-to-day setting up of the task force to the superintendent, because that is her job, to organize the task force, to contact all of the people that are available to help us do it. I'm not saying that we're voting on the school board sitting here and calling up the chief of police. I'm saying that we're voting on whether this board feels that we need a task force as a priority, as we list safety as a priority and a goal, and we feel that one way to, in this day and age, do what so many school districts across the country are doing, and vote to set up a task force to move forward with that, with the responsibility and direct our superintendent to make it happen.
Madam Chair? Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, we're gonna take a few more comments, and then we're gonna pull it to a vote. Mr.
Martin.
Jordan, do you mind if I
Yes,
just
I
yield
yield.
to Ms. Martin?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just feel like this conversation's unraveling again, and so could we just, because I really think that the information gathering piece is definitely the first step, and then and I do believe that the task force, as we talked about it before, was more of like a committee, a temporary committee of the board working with the administration, and an information gathering, with the direction of is Mr. Walker, correct? And he the expert. So I would like to, I guess my motion would be that I'm not going to say, okay. So I would be interested in the information gathering piece, and then using that, because it should lay out what resources are available or are in place, where our vulnerabilities lie, and some objectives for closing those gaps in our vulnerabilities, and that's something that we can decide on how we handle that moving forward.
So, Ms. Martin, are you offering a friendly amendment to add information gathering to the main motion?
It seems like, how do we do this without information gathering? I don't understand.
Well,
Yeah, we can add that to it, so
It
that
seems-
it would read,
Okay.
resolution to move forward with a Safe Schools Task Force with further development of the scope, the desired outcomes, the assessment of current practices and information gathering with a timeline for reports.
Yeah,
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
well, I mean, you have to have a discussion on information.
we can call it whatever.
Yeah.
We don't have to.
I mean, the information gathering has to be first and foremost before we even get to the point of having a task force. I think the expectation that we could set forward is to ask the superintendent to provide us with an update about what it is we currently are doing and have her provide us with any data that we want to then say, okay, it looks, with her recommendation as well, to say we need a task force in place. I think the fact that we're, the direction of this conversation, if that's not indication of why we should table this discussion to a later date, I don't know what is, because right now we need to, I think, move on. We're not at a point where we understand what it is we're even asking anymore. So.
Well, I think Ms. Campson has made it clear that she brought the information. She sent emails to everybody. She sent information on the committee recommendations to individuals.
On the first one, yes, and it was included on that one, and then
Okay. We discussed it last week. It was determined that it was the will of the board to move forward with the Safe Schools Task Force. We are bringing it back for discussion. Sometimes there are topics that we need to move on, and I understand your sensitivity, the concern that you bring about gathering the information first. I understand that. And if it is the will of the board to gather more information and bring this to the discussion on the 12th, then I will accept that. But right now, I would like to vote on the resolution as presented with the friendly amendment, if that's correct protocol, Mr. Clayton. Mm-hmm. And let's move forward with this. And certainly, as it evolves, we can continue to have discussion on it. So.
I call the question, Madam Chair. Clerk.
Ms. Basine? Hold on, can you state what it is that we're voting on, please?
Yes, we are voting.
Whatever the friendly amendment was.
Okay, we are voting on a resolution to move forward with the Safe Schools Task Force with further development, and here we go. Resolution to move forward with the Safe Schools Task Force to assess current practices, gather information, discuss the scope, and report out on a timeline for the information that has been obtained.
I second.
It's already seconded.
Okay.
Call the question, Mr. Clerk.
I third it.
Ms. Basine?
Nay.
Ms. Campson?
yes.
Mr. Clanton?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Comment first. If it's our responsibility to govern through policy, with what we're currently doing, it seems like we're moving into the operational piece of it and telling the superintendent how to do her job. And for that reason, I say no.
I disagree with Christine's, Ms. Smith's comments. I believe that this affects policy and budget making, our biggest policy, and also the safety of our staff, faculty, community, students, and I vote yes.
So Ms. Martin, yes? Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Jordan?
Again, our process for the last 4 years, we would have referred this to the policy committee, and the policy committee would have reviewed this in consultation with the administration and come back per the policy process and determine where it falls and whether or not a task force is warranted. This was an item that we added on the agenda just moments ago, and I think one of the reasons why the conversation was unraveling is it's a great idea, but it's not fleshed out. And as I read the original recommendations, we were, based upon those recommendations, determining some of the initial folks who would be a part of the task force and who was going to staff and so forth. I just think this is not good governance at all, and for that reason, I vote nay.
This is embarrassing.
Dr. Gabriel?
Aye. Okay. Okay, the motion has passed. We are going to move to adjourn our meeting tonight. We will be going into a closed executive session for discussion of legal matters. Do I hear a motion before we close our meeting to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Move that the members of the school board go into a closed session for the purposes which are set out in subsection A of section 2.2-3711 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation or other specific legal matters requiring a provision of legal counsel and advice pursuant to subsection 7 and 8 of the above cited code section. The substance of this section of the motion refers to consultation and briefing regarding the school board's legal relation to the Norfolk Education Foundation and the pending litigation with the Norfolk Education Foundation. Ms. Basine?
Aye.
Ms. Campson?
Aye.
Mr. Clanton?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
As part of this, I'm supposed to address a declaration of possible conflict of interest as related to this matter. And as such, I like to read again my declaration as I understand it. I'm supposed to read each time we discuss this. So it says, in the event that I have a personal interest, I make this declaration out of an abundance of caution, pursuant to an opinion of the Conflict of Interest Act Council and pursuant to Virginia Code Sections 2.2-3115H and 2.2-3112B. I intend to participate in any transaction of the school board of the city of Norfolk concerning the Norfolk Education Foundation, including decisions concerning the future conduct of a lawsuit involving the foundation and the school board. I might be considered to have a personal interest in such transaction in that I was the chair of the school board by virtue of that position, a member of the board of the foundation, and that I have been personally named in the filings in the lawsuit involving the foundation and the school board. However, I am a member of a profession, occupation, or group, the members of which are affected by the transaction, and I am able to participate in such transactions fairly, objectively, and in the public interest. Rodney Jordan, I vote aye.
Dr. Gabriel?
Aye.
And Mr. Clerk, I'd also like to state that also my declaration is on file with the city attorney.
Okay, we are adjourned.